Hello and welcome to Mr. Connally's Math. We're talking about perpendicular lines today. Before we go any further, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to get information about future videos. Guidelines for using this video effectively are: watch and listen to the video, sound should be on, do not skip ahead, do not just mindlessly copy the work, pause the video when you need time to write or think, put a question mark next to problems you don't understand, rewatch and listen to the video when needed, and ask questions in class or in the comments below. Our key concepts for today: how do you graph perpendicular lines? Well, let's say I have a line, y equals 3/4 x plus 2. We know this is slope-intercept form, so 3/4 is the slope, or the ratio of the vertical change over the horizontal change. Now, to be perpendicular, the slope we've calculated as 3/4. To be perpendicular to another line, it has to be something called a negative reciprocal. So notice that these lines are perpendicular, but their slopes are not the same as in parallel lines. When we take the slope of the first line and multiply it by the slope of the second line, it has to equal -1. And that's how we'll know that the slopes are perpendicular. Another group of perpendicular lines are vertical and horizontal lines. So if I have a zero slope and an undefined slope line intersecting, they'll intersect and make a perpendicular line by definition. Okay, so again, perpendicular lines have a negative reciprocal slope. That means if I multiply 3/4 times -4/3, I will get -1/1, which is -1. Okay, another way to think of it is they're a negative reciprocal. So I take the opposite of 3/4, which is -3/4, and then I take the reciprocal of that, which is 4/3. I get -4/3 is the negative reciprocal of 3/4. Okay, and lastly, don't forget, horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular. All right, let's get started. Now, are the two lines perpendicular? We don't actually have to graph them to know. We can just look at their slope. So as long as we can find their slope, we can see if they're perpendicular or not by multiplying them together and see if they equal -1. All right, so y minus 9 equals 3 times the quantity x plus 5. This is point slope form, so we know slope 1 is going to be 3. And then the next equation, we see it's in slope-intercept form. That's easy for us. It's -1/3. So slope 2 is -1/3. Now I just take the two slopes and multiply them together. 3 times -1/3. And if I get -1, then I know that they're perpendicular. If I don't get -1, then they are not perpendicular. So 3/1, 3 times -1 is -3. 3 times 1 is 3. Oh, I've got -3/3. Oh wait, let's simplify. -3 divided by 3 is -1, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. What do you know? It is equal to -1. Therefore, these lines are perpendicular. Okay, so let's look at B now. We know the slope of this line is going to be 2/5. So that's slope 1. And then 2x minus 5y equals 10. Again, we don't know the slope because it's in standard form, but we can solve for y to get find the slope in slope-intercept form. So let's subtract 2x from both sides. 10 minus 2x is just -2x plus 10, and minus 5y. This cancels to 0. Okay, now I just divide everything by -5, and I get y equals -2 over -5 is actually 2/5 x minus 2. Okay, so the slope is going to be 2/5. So the slope of number 2 is 2/5. Now, already we see that 2/5 is the same as 2/5, so that means the lines are actually parallel, but they are not perpendicular. So I'll go ahead and prove that to you by doing 2/5 times 2/5 Does this equal -1? 2/5 times 2/5 is 4/25. That does not equal -1. Therefore, these are not perpendicular, which we already knew that because they're parallel. So they're not perpendicular. These ones are, because they multiplied and they gave us -1. This one does not give us -1. So therefore, they are not perpendicular. Okay, let's move on to graphing. All right, graphing perpendicular lines. We want to graph the line that passes through the point 4, -5 and is perpendicular to the line with the following equation, y equals 4/3 x plus 2. Okay, so first let's go ahead and graph the line y equals 4/3 x plus 2. We know this has a slope of 4/3. So this is our first line. It has a slope of 4/3. And the y-intercept is 2, positive 2. So it's going to intercept right here at y equals 2 and x equals 0. Okay, and then the slope is 4/3, so from this point we can just go 1, 2, 3, 4 up, and 1, 2, 3 to the right. And there we have our second point, and now we can use our straight edge to draw our line. All right, so there are lots of lines that are perpendicular to this line. There's an infinite amount. But there's only one line that goes through the point 4, -5, and that's what we're trying to find. So let's put the point on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 4, -5. So we need a line that goes through and is perpendicular like that. So what would that line look like, and what is its equation? Well, we know that the equation is going to be y equals mx plus b. And we know the slope is going to be the inverse or the negative reciprocal of 4/3. So let's think of it this way. We can take the 4/3 and make it 3/4, and then we'll make it the inverse or the opposite, and it'll be negative. So the slope of the second line is actually going to be -3/4. So it's going to go down 3 and right 4 as opposed to going up 4 and right 3. Okay, so we know it's going to be y equals -3/4 x plus b. Okay, now we've got a problem though. We don't know what b is, and we don't at the moment know x and y. We can't solve this with 3 variables. But do we really not know what x and y are? Let's think about this. We know that one of the values of the points would be 4, -5. That's an x and that's a y. That's something we know. So we could actually substitute x equals 4 and y equals -5. So let's do that. So y equal, oops, sorry, not y. We'll take out y and we'll put -5 equals -3/4 times 4 plus b. Now we've got one variable. We can solve for it. So let's simplify. This is going to be -5 equals -3/4 times 4. The 4's cancel, and we're left with -3 plus b. Okay, now we just got b plus -3. That's the same as adding 3 to both sides. And these cancel, and we're left with -5 plus 3 is -2 equals b. So we know the y-intercept is -2. We can take that and substitute it back into the equation. So our new line is going to have a point of 4, -5, and it's going to have a slope of -3/4. So it's going to go down 3 and over 4, or I could do up 3 and left 4. Okay, so down 3 and right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and so we just sketch our line through there. And as we go through, and you can use this point right here. This is actually the y-intercept, which is -2, which we found out anyway. And you draw it through there, and it will make a 90-degree angle right there. You can measure with a protractor if you wanted to. Okay, so this equation is going to be y equals -3/4 x, and we substitute that in, and we'll say -2. Okay, and that's the line that's perpendicular but goes through the point 4, -5. Okay, all right, we're ready? Let's move on to the next. Graph the line that is perpendicular to y equals 2.5 and passes through 4, -3. Okay, so we know we need to be able to graph vertical lines and horizontal lines. This is y equals 2.5. That's going to be a horizontal line. This is where all the y's equal 2.5. So let's find a y that equals 2.5. 1, 2, 2.5. 1, 2, 2.5. 1, 2, 2.5. See all these y's I'm making? 2.5. 2.5. All of those are where y equals 2.5. So that means this is going to be y equals 2.5 because every y value is equal to 2.5. Okay, and we want a line that is perpendicular to this but passes through the point 4, -3. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph 4, -3. 1, 2, 3, 4, and down 3. 1, 2, 3. So here's 4, -3. Okay, to be perpendicular, if this is a horizontal line, we need a vertical line that goes through here like this. So just draw a vertical line. Okay, and what's the equation of that vertical line? We know when they're vertical, we write them as x equals something. Well, what does x equal in this case? Every single point on this line is where x equals, that's right, 4. There's a 4 here. So that means that this is the answer. X equals 4 is our graph of the line that's perpendicular to 2.5 and passes through the point 4, -3. Okay, so that's a way that you can graph a perpendicular line using horizontal or vertical lines. Okay, go ahead and finish that up. And now let's summarize. Okay, in summary, how do you graph perpendicular lines? If I have this line and I found my slope is 3/4, to make a perpendicular line, I need to have a slope that's the reciprocal and then negative or the inverse of that. So our slope has vertical change over horizontal change. We also know that the slope of vertical lines are also perpendicular. Okay, so make sure you have those in your notes. We always want to make sure that the slopes are not the same, but they are negative reciprocals, meaning that when you multiply them together, they equal -1. All right? Okay, you're all done with that? Great job. Keep working hard. I appreciate all the hard work that you've been doing. If you need anything, please let me know. I'm here to help. Now I just want to tell you,
excellent work on completing this tutorial. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to Mr. Connally's Math and Mr. Connally's High School Math channels to get updates on future videos. Thanks for watching.
MrConnally.com